Hello, and welcome to the Global Summit on Economic Abuse. I'm Nicola Sharp-Jeffs. If the contents of this session raise any issues for you, we encourage you to take whatever steps you need to prioritise your own well-being. If you'd like to reach out for support, you'll find a link in the chat to the No More Global Directory, a global directory of specialist domestic abuse and sexual violence services. So, in this session, we're exploring one of the most innovative and expansive responses to financial abuse in the financial sector, the Next Chapter programme at the Commonwealth Bank of Australia, Australia's largest bank. And joining us to share insights into the programme's impact and future direction is the Customer Advocate at Commonwealth Bank, Angela McMillan. Hi, Angela. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much for having me, Nicola.
It's an absolute pleasure. So I'm going to start by asking you, what prompted Commonwealth Bank to launch the Next Chapter programme in 2020? And what core problem were you aiming to address?
So the journey really started in 2015 when Rosie Batty, who was our Australian of the Year at the time, put out a call to everyone in the nation to play a role in addressing domestic and family violence. And we at CommBank listened. And so we started supporting initiatives to help people impacted by domestic and family violence. And initially, this included training our people, tailored assistance for impacted customers, and developing resources for use by our teams. But we heard from victim survivors and we learnt from a range of experts that the scale and the impact of financial abuse in the context of domestic and family violence was an emerging and increasingly prevalent issue. And so for those of you who may not be familiar with the term, and I'm hoping that everyone at the forum is, just so we're all on the same page, financial abuse from a CommBank perspective is a serious form of domestic and family violence, and it occurs when an abuser uses money and resources to gain power and to control their partner or a family member. It is, as we all know, one of the most insidious ways that an abuser can keep a partner or a family member trapped in an abusive relationship. And it can also influence a victim survivor's ability to stay safe once they leave that relationship. Now, research shows that an estimated 4.2 million Australian adults, now that's 21% of our population, have experienced violence. They've experienced emotional abuse or economic abuse by an intimate partner since the age of 15. And research commissioned by CommBank found that in 2020 alone, financial abuse directly cost victim survivors an estimated $5.7 billion, and the broader economy, $5.2 billion. Now, while these financial impacts don't tell the whole story about the harm caused by this form of domestic and family violence, the research does provide insight into the scale of the issue. And so building on this work, CommBank made a long-term bank-wide commitment to seek to support people in Australia who are affected by financial abuse, to help them break free from those abusive relationships and achieve long-term financial independence. And so this really culminated in the launch of CommBank Next Chapter in 2020, which saw the creation of the Financial Independence Hub, as well as the establishment of our very own dedicated customer-facing Next Chapter team.
That all sounds amazing work, and viewers will have heard the Unheard Riches session where Rosie speaks so powerfully. So it's fantastic to see how her experience acted as a catalyst for all this really fantastic work. So Angela, you've mentioned the Next Chapter as one of the pillars of your work. No, I'm sorry, you've mentioned the Financial Independence Hub as part of Next Chapter, which is a pillar of your work. And there's something about the Next Chapter Innovation Initiative. Do you think you could talk us through that, please?
Yeah, absolutely. So there are 4 pillars to the CommBank Next Chapter program. Now, the first one is really kind of what started our thinking in this space, and that is immediate support. Now, that is immediate support for individuals with banking and financial needs, and that comes through to our specialist, trauma-informed, dedicated Next Chapter team. Now, in 2022, we expanded this support to anyone, regardless of who they bank with in Australia. And we now have over 20,000 interactions with individuals impacted by financial abuse each year. Now, our second pillar recognises, and we heard quite early on in our work, that the long-term recovery of victim survivors of financial abuse can be long, and it's not a kind of a short point of time. It needs an all-encompassing approach, and so our second pillar is very much focused on that longer-term recovery through the Financial Independence Hub that I mentioned before, and that's actually delivered in partnership with Good Shepherd. It's funded by CommBank, but we have a very strong and very proud relationship with Good Shepherd in delivering that. And that assists victim survivors of financial abuse to regain their confidence and move towards that longer-term financial independence and confidence. And again, it's available to anyone who is impacted by financial abuse, regardless of who they bank with. And importantly, it was co-designed with survivor advocates to really incorporate the voices of lived experience in its design. Now, our third pillar is really focused on partnerships with community organisations and research organisations. Now, we recognise that we may be Australia's largest bank, but we need to be part of an ecosystem of response. And so these partnerships really help us identify new and creative ways to get ahead of evolving perpetrator behaviour. Examples of this include Next Chapter Innovation, which you just mentioned, and that's our program to accelerate action that supports financial abuse recovery within the community. Now, our current round of Next Chapter Innovation really focuses on supporting our First Nations communities here in Australia by partnering with organisations that are First Nations led and or community controlled. And another example of these partnerships is one that we have with the University of New South Wales with their Gendered Violence Research Network. And we've developed with them a research series which really explores the current knowledge of financial abuse in Australia. And we have those resources available to everyone on the CommBank Next Chapter Financial Abuse Resource Centre page. And then our fourth pillar is really where we're focusing a lot of our efforts now, and that's on prevention. So it's all very well to have the supports in place for people who have experienced financial abuse and are experiencing it, but how to actually help reduce it and stop it from happening in the first instance. So we're very much focused within CommBank on better understanding how our own products and services, and when we talk about products, we're talking about accounts, we're talking about our loans, we're talking about our platforms. So how can those be misused to perpetrate abuse? And a good example of this has been our move to update our terms and conditions to really clearly spell out that the banking system is no place for financial abuse, and there are consequences for those that use our accounts or our platforms in that way. And this sends a really strong message to all customers that financial abuse is just unacceptable.
Yes, and I believe you're signed up to the Respect and Protect campaign, aren't you, around the T's and C's with Catherine Fitzpatrick. So again, viewers, you'll have seen or be able to see the panel that we've got on banking responses to economic abuse as well. Angela, you mentioned that part of the programme's commitment, I guess, is to provide support to those experiencing or being subjected to financial abuse in Australia, regardless of who someone banks with. So they don't have to bank with Commonwealth to access that support. How does that work in practice? And why was that such an important thing for you as a bank?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, obviously our Next Chapter team provides free and confidential support and referrals to victim survivors, no matter who they bank with, but it's also available to all people of all genders and sexualities as well. So for us, it was very important that we make it an entirely accessible and inclusive avenue for support. Now, that support can include a whole range of things, and that can be assistance with immediate financial and banking needs, such as opening safe accounts, removing unauthorised access and unauthorised access from devices, and providing things like hardship support. We also link people into crisis support services and a whole range of other support services to help people get back on their feet. Now, really at CommBank, the reason that we're doing this is because we recognise the role that we can play in helping to address the significant impacts of financial abuse and really improve those outcomes for victim survivors. And we also know that financial abuse doesn't discriminate, and people of all genders, backgrounds, sexual orientation and cultures can be impacted. So really recognising the scale and the impact of the issue, we made a decision to make Next Chapter support available to anyone. And it's a really important principle for us, because, really only when sectors, whether it be all sectors, whether it be businesses, government, or community organisations come together and provide that opportunity for support and trust and being heard, can we really address this insidious issue of financial abuse.
Yeah, it's so important that it doesn't matter where you bank, does it, that you would get that consistent response. So it's fantastic. It really is. I know something else that New Chapter has done has been to introduce technology to block abusive transaction messages and enable self-reporting of that. How significant has that been in reducing the technology facilitated abuse?
Yeah, so as the customer advocate for CommBank, I see the best and sometimes the worst of technology. So for the majority of Australians, the ability to undertake digital banking, so use an app to undertake their daily banking activities, has been really pivotal and a really positive experience. But we also know that it's opened up channels for perpetrators to inflict harm, new ways of inflicting harm, and to do it from a distance and to do it long after a relationship ends. And we have seen, for example, our digital banking platforms, our app and our website, being used by perpetrators as a weapon. And I'll give a bit of background to that. In 2019, we had a customer who reached out to our Next Chapter team, and she was a victim survivor, and she had a perpetrator ex who continued to get in contact with her. Now, she had undertaken a range of activities to protect herself, such as locking down her social media, changing her phone number, changing addresses, and had orders out against him. But he'd found one last way of contacting her, and that was by sending very low 1 or 2 cent transactions to her, multiple transactions at a time, and using the free text field in the transaction description to say some pretty horrific things. Now, obviously, we didn't design our platform for this process, and we had never even thought that it could be a possibility. So when we became aware of it, we knew that we wanted to act quickly, and we wanted to make it very clear that that is no place for people to harm each other. So what we did was, because we hadn't come across it before, we undertook some analysis, and we found that there'd actually been 8,000 instances of very low value transactions, multiple transactions with quite horrific transaction descriptions over the preceding 3 months. And so that gave us even more impetus to take action quickly. So what we did was we updated our policies, we've updated our terms and conditions to be very clear about the standards that we expect of people using our platforms. And we implemented a language block on some of the most offensive and abusive language that we saw. Now, I think in the last 5 years, that block has blocked about 1 million transactions. But we also found that some of the more insidious messaging wasn't actually containing profanity. It was things like, "You looked amazing at the train station this morning. I always liked you in the purple dress," right through to things like, "Yeah, I love you." And so what we did was we thought, right, we need to get a little bit smarter about this. So we developed an AI model, which actually runs over our transactions and picks up on a range of parameters. And it identifies high risk transactions, which are then sent through to our Next Chapter team, who take human eyes onto those examples and really determine what are the next steps. And they can be everything from picking up the phone and having a welfare check with the recipient. Are you okay? Do you know that this is unacceptable, what's happening, through to you? Here are some supports, through to consequences for the senders. And that can be anything from a warning through to a digital suspension for a while. And in some extreme cases, we actually terminate our banking relationship. And so through that AI model, we've identified more than 1,500 high-risk transactions per year since 2021. And we now make that AI model available to any financial institution around the world to use for free, with a view to helping reduce financial abuse on an international scale.
I imagine there'll be a lot of viewers making a note of that and getting into contact. So, thanks for your generosity in sharing that. It's such a powerful tool, and to hold perpetrators to account within it, I think is particularly important. You talked about partnering with organisations like Good Shepherd and others in the domestic and family violence sector. How have those collaborations strengthened the programme's impact, would you say?
So over a number of years, CommBank has partnered with community organisations to develop capacity and capability in the domestic and family violence sector, and also to gather insights. We're constantly learning as well. And so, as I mentioned before, since 2020, the Good Shepherd Financial Independence Hub has provided that ongoing support for people. And we partner with an organisation called Fitted for Work as well, which provides employment support to victim survivors who want to join the workforce, and kits them up with free wardrobes to restore dignity and confidence as they're entering back into the workforce. We also have a partnership with an organisation called Thriving Communities Australia, and they have a one-stop, one-story solution. And what that enables us to do is securely and safely share information with other organisations, with our customers' consent. And that can be telecommunications, utility organisations. And that's really predicated on helping our victim survivors not have to tell their story again and again, and to access the right support from other organisations as they need it. And so these partnerships not only are helping our customers, but they're also really enriching our understanding of the impact of financial abuse, and is really enabling us to have that holistic wraparound support to help people who are impacted.
That's so important, that holistic response, isn't it? And as you say, not having to relive that trauma over and over again. I think the impact is clear. Is there any measurable impact in terms of how this has impacted the financial independence of survivors? And I guess the next question is, what's next?
And so absolutely. So being a bank, we love numbers, and so I've touched on a couple already. But last financial year, as I said, the Next Chapter team provided support to about 20,000 impacted individuals. We've also supported about 13,000 participants through the Financial Independence Hub to really help them take those steps towards recovery. We've provided more than $1 million to date through Next Chapter Innovation, together with a range of non-financial support, such as executive support, so executive coaching and mentoring to help accelerate some of those innovative responses in communities. Look, we know it's going to take a long time to address this issue, and we remain committed to doing our part as part of our broader commitment as CommBank to really build a brighter future for all. But I think there's lots of work that we can be doing, particularly in that prevention space, and a big focus of ours moving forward will be how do we really embed that safety by design into everything that we do. So from the very outset, we are building a banking system that really reduces the risk of our systems and our products and our services from being used to further harm others.
Again, amazing. And your answer reminds me of something I heard yesterday, which is, we count what we care about, and to hold yourself, accountable in terms of your response to customers. Again, it's just incredible work. So thanks so much, Angela, for joining me today and just sharing those valuable insights into how Next Chapter is helping to create safer financial futures for people impacted by economic abuse. It's clear that collaboration between financial institutions such as yourselves, community organisations like Good Shepherd, and technology can make a real difference. And we're really looking forward to seeing how this programme continues to evolve and inspire similar initiatives globally. And we hope very much, at the next summit to be hearing about your progress, where you've got to, and I'm sure hearing from others in terms of how you've inspired them, as I say. So thanks once again, and thank you very much to our audience for joining us for this really important conversation. Thanks, everybody.